Welcome to a video from Third Wave Sabotage. My name is Tim. Today we're looking at the top 10 items I wish G.I. Joe made toys of. So, as we do this, I realize people have made customs of these, but in general, for the toys we're going to talk about here, they weren't made by a company like Hasbro or Super 7. And even as I say that, I had to do my research to check out, like, well, was there some obscure company that made this? I don't think so, but leave your comments as we go through these top 10. And if you're like, no, actually a small company from Japan or China or Vietnam, some small US company made a version of this. I want to hear about that because these are toys I'd like to get, honestly. So let's start at number 10. Number 10, president and manager of the Wild West Haulin' Company. It's Honolulu West. So she arrives in an episode called The Palace of Doom, and she is kidnapped in the back of one of her actual trucks. Roadblock hops into the back of the truck and then hears these sounds. He's like, oh, I'm gonna have to fight a Cobra. No, it's Honolulu West. They become friends. I love her sassy attitude. I think her outfit is great. She's got that cowgirl thing going on, which is a nice sort of compliment to somebody like Wild Bill. Third off, she's like a key part of them getting out. If you remember, Duke and Snake Eyes are going to be fighting against these huge, like, electronic laser-built snake cobra things, and they have to cross these two, like, power lines or power poles together, and Honolulu West is the one who helps do it. So a lot of people for a long time have said we'd love to have a figure of Honolulu West. I definitely think Super 7 would be a great company to make this character, but she's just a really fun character. She's got a great attitude. She adds a lot, even to the short amount of time she's in the episodes. So Honolulu West is number 10 on this list. I wish they made a toy of her back in the day. Little additional note here. If you know the Coastal Defender, it's sort of like a trailer that breaks open into like this little mobile defense unit type thing. I'd love to see Honolulu West with a truck that opens up sort of like the back of Optimus Prime or the trailer of Optimus Prime from the original Transformers, and was sort of like a little base. I thought that could be a really cool way for them to include her in the G.I. Joe line if they made a toy of her. All right, number 9 is Mara. And Mara is basically like the original Hydro Viper, right? So she is a woman who has like genetic modifications made to her so she can be this really effective, essentially like a mermaid who works for Cobra. This is the episode back in November of 1985. It came out, Memories of Mara, and Shipwreck really quickly falls in love with her, or at least has strong feelings toward her. When you look at it as an adult, you're probably like, oh, that was a little bit quick. But nonetheless, she's a super cool character, and it gives you a sense of how Cobra is like, yeah, we're willing to do whatever we need to do to our different troops to make them more effective to accomplish our purposes. So Hydro Vipers, if you know them, they get special things kind of carried out, experiments carried out on them so they can be more effective in the work they're doing. That's certainly true of Mara. We see that carried out in large form with somebody like Dr. Mindbender. But she was a cool character. She clearly didn't want to work for Cobra, but she had been kidnapped. And then there's a sort of like love-lost thing where Shipwreck has to free her to go back into the ocean, even though he really has feelings for her. But she would have been an awesome character, even if they made her for Cobra and she was like, no, like, I want to serve Cobra. That would have been sad, but it would have been cool to have a Cobra figure of her, similar to like an eel, but without all the external apparatus because she could essentially breathe underwater or at least hold her breath for a long time. Even cooler would be if G.I. Joe rescued her and maybe they couldn't heal her, but they used her as a soldier who fights in the water and so made the best life possible for her despite those genetic modifications that were made. So just your basic like Cobra looking figure with this Mara head on top with the long black hair and the bluish purplish skin. Or, you know, in the theory, you could have rescued her and then have her be a G.I. Joe who's in a wetsuit who's doing that same type of thing. But really cool character. Wish they made Mara. October 24th, 1985 is when the episode comes out with this character who's number 8 on the list. It's the Viper. Now, I don't know if you remember when you first saw this episode, but for me, I'm just like looking at it as an adult. I'm like, yeah, well, I know it's going to be this old dude at the end. But at the beginning of the episode, I can still hear Barbecue being like, yeah, what's that? The Viper?
Well, looks like my party's a success. Hello?
Mr. Barbecue, this is the Viper.
Like, he calls, you don't know who it is, it's this dangerous guy. Maybe you were like really smart as a kid and you were like, no, it's clearly the Viper. No, but he's the Viper. And like the whole episode, there's all these things that happen, and yet at the end you find this guy The Viper, he's going to wipe the windows once it's out at the west corner, $5.75 an hour, which is crazy to think about that being what he would charge to wipe windows. I don't think an actual figure of this would have been like something I would use all the time. And I'm actually not a guy who just wants to collect like random figures that I can't put in photography or video or stuff like that. But this guy stands out. It was such a funny, kind of wacky episode. To have the Viper would be awesome. So a tiny little guy in his overalls, glasses, the mustache, the hat, and his I think he has a bucket and then like the squeegee. I think that would just be awesome. Again, this is a very Super 7 type character to build, but the Viper comes in at number 7.
I'm Barbecue.
I'm the Viper. I've come to wipe your windows. $5.75 an hour. I start on west corner. Top floor first.
The Viper at number 7. Number 6 is the Cobra transport plane, often known as the Vulture. So this is basically a VTOL. So it's going to take off vertically and then the wings are going to turn so it can fly. Big black and gray body and that huge Cobra head in the front with a Cobra hood behind it. This was a vehicle that was in a lot of different episodes. It was just super cool. And when you think about how big the Rattler was back in the day, to have something like this that could actually transport something like a bunch of his tanks, it would have been absolutely massive. But if you watch G.I. Joe, you know that, especially with the Sunbow series, scale was sometimes different than what we expect, right? Sometimes I just watched an episode with a Snowcat. The Snowcat looks twice the size of the toy that it is in the TV show, but then later on in the TV show, maybe it's a smaller size. So sizes seem to change. This thing was really, really cool looking. I love the fact that it would be able to open up the mouth and like you could fly one of the trouble bubbles or some trouble bubbles in. It could land, close up, and then they go out and kind of wander around the plane. It was also a very agile, despite the fact that it was massive. Yeah, this would have been a huge investment for them to make something like this. But if you think about something like the Sky Striker, which was pretty large as well, this could have been something they created. In the Revenge of Cobra Killer Rides, when the Joes and the Cobras are basically coming to both try to figure out what's going on with Zartan at this abandoned amusement park, you actually see a bunch of Rattlers. It looks like they're taking off from inside, not that they were just flying alongside. So that's a massive, massive plane if you're going to do something like that. But I think you could have shrunk it down a little bit. That was just such a cool, cool vehicle. And I love the color too, because Cobra had a lot of the blue, but the black went nicely, like with Destro flying it and then with like a hiss in it. That would have been a really, really neat feature to have the Cobra Vulture as a toy. They didn't make it, probably too expensive. I've seen people make them actually, I think out of cardboard, right? They like customizers make them out of cardboard, but I'd love to see something like this in the future. Cobra Vulture, definitely a winner. Number 6 is a very popular character / vehicle that I think a lot of people agree with me. We wish we had a toy of this. It's the Cobra Water Robots. So these guys come out in Pyramid of Darkness Part 1. They come out of a river to rescue Cobra Commander and the twins. And then they take them down into the Cobra base that's in the river, which is like, how did they build a base in a river? But maybe it went out into the ocean. Anyhow, side story. But then a bunch of Joes go into the water to try to figure out what's going on. And these huge water robots are basically fighting against the Joes. These things are massive. You will see, similarly to other vehicles, robots, locations, bases, the size like is huge, and then they're a little bit smaller, and then they're a little bit bigger. So it kind of shifts during the story. But that being said, these things are awesome. So I wish they made something like this. You could have made it maybe like, 4 times as big as like the Snake. And you could fit, I mean, that's not that huge. It's maybe like, say a foot tall, maybe a little bit more, and then be able to open them up to put some characters inside, even just 1 or 2. But they were super cool characters. And it was amazing how they were robotic and slow, but that, in my mind as a kid, that was more because they were underwater, not because they were, made really clunky. They were very fluid in their motion, I thought, for a huge robot. And it was like, they were plain enough that it didn't scream like, oh, this is Cobra. It's clearly like a huge robot that can be controlled, whether it's driven inside or by remote control. It didn't have 25 Cobra logos on it. Its head wasn't necessarily made of a snake. While we will talk about something like that in the future in this video. But I think a lot of people like these. Again, this is a classic Super 7 thing they could build. Yeah, I wish they made these types of things, even if they made it relatively simple in its articulation, but you could open it up like a shell, you know, and you could have some figures inside who are doing something, so that you could actually have it sort of like set up open like this, and you could have it as like a little play set. Think like Castle Grayskull, how that would open up and you would be able to like play with your Motu figures in there. That would be kind of cool if you had something like that for your 3 3/4 character. So water robots, love those guys. Wish they made one. All right, number 5 may be a little bit controversial because some people like this branch of G.I. Joe. Some people do not like it at all. It's Cobra Commander when he was working with Cobra-La. So depending on kind of how you build the storyline of G.I. Joe in your head, maybe it's straight up Sunbow, maybe it's Sunbow with the movie, Sunbow without the movie. It's the comic books, maybe it's the comic books combined with Sunbow. Some people really like Cobra Commander and the Cobra-La story. Some people don't at all. But from the movie, it is pretty cool to see Cobra Commander before he is just with his hood or with his steel mask. So I thought this guy was really cool. I think now would be a great time for G.I. Joe Classified to be thinking about this Cobra Commander. Now, we do have quite a few Cobra Commanders already. We just got Pythona. We just got some releases showing us the renders of the Royal Guard. We've already got Nemesis Enforcer. People definitely want Globulus. But in the future, to have a Cobra Commander who is that, he could be a collector's edition. He could be something from a Comic-Con or something like that. But he is a pretty cool looking character. Even though it's very brief, you could build your own storyline that has Cobra-La as part of the story. If you're following the Energon universe, you know, there's this kind of linking of like Nemesis Enforcer was in the Cobra Commander episode or the Cobra Commander edition, that short storyline of Cobra Commander. So I'm not sure how it's all going to tie together, but having a Cobra Commander from Cobra-La, I think that would be definitely quite cool. Number 4 sort of falls into that category too, where it's not the type of character that you're going to use a ton in photos or video or stuff, but I would have loved to see a Worlds Without End Stealer, especially after he got bit by the bug. So if you know the episode, I mean, there's like time travel, Baroness ends up becoming a good guy, basically. Some of the guys stay in a different time than the real G.I. Joes in modern time or current time. But Steeler gets bit by this bug and he's like, kind of going crazy, right? He's got this like pink under his eyes. To have a character with that would be awesome. Even if they did a 3 3/4, that would be super cool to have a guy who looks like Steeler, blonde hair, kind of disheveled, and then the pink under his eyes because he's like been infected and kind of going crazy. I think that would be unique. Again, this is not a guy who's going to have a ton of storyline, I don't think. But that being said, I think it could be a very, very cool character. All right, 3 to go. Number 3 is Hector Ramirez. He is in a ton of G.I. Joe episodes. He's that reporter who's always doing annoying things and getting people upset, but he does play a role in a variety of the episodes, and he does have crossover into some of the other Hasbro lines that are out there. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure it's Mask, and it may be in Humanoids as well. Don't quote me on that. Leave a comment. But within the G.I. Joe world, he's not a key character, but you could use him in a lot of photography and storytelling if you had a character of him, whether it was the Classified now or the 3 3/4 from back in the day. I was never a fan when he popped up on the show, but that makes me want the character because it clearly did something in me with how he portrayed himself, how they wrote him. I was like, yeah, this guy annoys me to no end. Yeah, that's what he's supposed to do. You're not supposed to be like, I really like him as a character. So Hector Ramirez, he would be a win if they made a character of him back in the day. We have 2 more, and we're going to get to that number 1 very shortly, but let me offer you some honorable mentions. So I think 3 honorable mentions. We have Satin the Singer, the Cobra Mothership, and then the Tube Worms. Now, the Tube Worms made a sound that to this day I'm like, when I hear it. It just like, gross. It makes me just feel nasty. But they were a really cool short element when in the mass device you got Cobra and G.I. Joe divers diving for the heavy water. So it adds a whole nother element in. They're fighting against each other and the actual Tube Worms. We do have the Tube Worms on the Eels cover for the Classified figure. I'm not sure if it's on the Torpedo one as well, but that would be a cool, simple figure you could make. You could get the tube, and then you could have them like pop out and pop back in, make them a sort of a rubbery character material, or maybe put like a metal wire inside it so you could twist them and angle them in different ways. That would make for some awesome dioramas. Second is Satin, very famous Satin. She sings Snake Eyes and Polly and Timber and Shipwreck. get up on stage. They're in the van with her. I mean, she's kind of like a cool character. Again, short amount of time that she's in the episodes, but she is a cool character, has some of that Honolulu West vibe. And if you look up the backstory, I just heard on the Audible Interlude podcast, the woman who does the voice for Satin has a long history, which is actually pretty cool. She's a very famous actress. And then the last one is the Cobra Mothership. Now, Super 7 tried to fundraise or do a crowdfund for this ship. I was going to go in on it. I was just waiting a little bit, and then it was like, okay, they just were not going to do it because there wasn't enough money coming in. But I'm not a Super 7 collector. I don't think I have any Super 7s at this point. But that thing was so cool. I was like, I want to get that. That'll make awesome photography and such. So the Cobra Mothership, I think, would be a great thing for us to have today, and certainly back in the day as well. Now, with that said, let's move on to number 2, and I'll be honestly surprised if you know about this thing. And it's not because I'm some sort of G.I. Joe pro. It's just because I was watching one of the episodes and I was like, wait, what in the world is that thing? Season 1, episode 30, it's called The Spell of the Siren. And there's this shell that if you blow into it, it puts out these sounds or waves that hypnotize all the men. Now, Baroness gets a hold of it. She's trying to connect with Major Blood to partner with him to carry out part of this mission. And in that episode, you're going to see a Cobra Hovercraft. It looks like the whale, but it's more teal colored. That thing would have been awesome to have. Now, people have made some amazing versions of the hovercraft. So people have made, versions, obviously of the G.I. Joe version, people have made like, you have the, obviously the Night Force version, but then customs where it's like Eel's version or a Crocmaster version or like a Cobra Moray style version, that coloration. This one, I'm like, man, I would have loved to have that. Even if it was like a different style, or even if it was the exact same thing, to have a Cobra Hovercraft would be amazing. The thing that's really interesting is there's not a ton of footage of it, as you'll see here, or as you do see here. But in addition to that, it's in an episode where they're in some sort of Arctic. It looks like they're in the mountains. So I don't know why they would choose a hovercraft for that setting, but they did. I mean, yeah, you can use a hovercraft on like snow and ice and land, but it looks like they're in a pretty isolated area. Maybe there's a huge river near them, but if I had had a Cobra Hovercraft, that would have been amazing. I love the Moray. think it's a great vehicle, great toy. The Night Landing, there's some other Cobra water vehicles, but a Cobra Hovercraft would have been off the charts. And the number 1 toy I wish they made back in the day is the Cobra Kaiju, also known as the Cobra Robot or the Cobra Sentinel. This thing was a huge robot. And as you hear me talk about it, you might say, well, didn't they make that? It is available even still today on eBay. So it's 2025, October right now. It's running $400+ on eBay, but it's not like it was made for G.I. Joe and it's just really expensive. It's a totally separate entity from what I understand, available over in Asia. But that thing was awesome. So it's at the Palace of Doom and you have Major Blood commanding it. And that thing is just monstrous. So the one that they actually have available, which looks almost one-to-one like the one they have in G.I. Joe, it's probably like that. It's probably, like 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. That thing would be amazing to get in footage. It would be actually challenging because you got to get really good angles to show how big it is compared to your 3 3/4. There were customs that were made of it, but again, I'm talking about like Hasbro putting it out or Super 7 putting it out. So it would be actually lower in cost because of their mass production. But I've always loved this thing. When I went to Joe Fest for the first time this past summer, that was the number 1 thing I was looking for. If I had found one of those, it would have been hard to say no and not bring that thing home with me. You can't see it, but at the top of my shelf right now, I actually brought home a Cobra Hammerhead, which I love, cool vehicle. But the Cobra Kaiju Sentinel Cobra massive robot steel mech thing, that thing I absolutely loved. So let me hear from you guys now. What toys do you wish they made of something that you saw in a G.I. Joe episode back in the day? Leave a comment. More videos here for you to check out. Thanks for watching, and more videos coming soon from Third Wave Sabotage. Yo, Joe.